Hey everyone, it's Alex Ball with another episode of the No-Till Market Garden Podcast. On today's show, I sit down again with Jordan Scheibel of Middleway Farm and discuss his newest project, Grinnell Farm to Table, located in Grinnell, Iowa. We dig deep on managing a multi-farm aggregated food hub, increasing sales on the farm, and diversifying your food business to be more resilient. Jordan is a wealth of knowledge and someone I've really enjoyed watching as they evolve the food business over the last couple of years. So any further ado, let's get to the episode.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden Podcast is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by ASAP, Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. ASAP, Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, will offer the Business of Farming Conference on Saturday, February 22nd in Asheville, North Carolina. This annual conference brings together professional and aspiring farmers from across the Southeast to network and share resources to build viable farm businesses. Scholarships for BIPOC and limited resource farmers are available, as well as discounts for farm partners registering together. Registration opens in mid-November. Find out more at asapconnections.org. That's asapconnections.org. All right, enjoy the show.
Jordan, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk with me about Middleway Farm, about your new food hub business. You've been on the show before, and for folks who don't know, where are you located and what kind of farming are you doing out there?
Yeah, so I'm located in Grinnell, Iowa, which is halfway between Des Moines and Iowa City, right in central Iowa. So we're zone 5A. And yeah, so I run Middleway Farm. It's on leased land just outside of town. So I've always lived in town. I commute about 1.5 miles out to the farm. So I've been on that piece of land since 2013. I rent about 4 acres. At the peak of my growing, I was growing on about 2 to 2.25 acres of that. And then I made this transition in March 2023, where I decided to scale down, kind of took a year off. And then this past year, I've been doing more part-time farming. So I've really shrunk the footprint of the farm to the point where I'm really only farming about 1/3 of an acre plus a high tunnel. And then for the time being, I just have the rest of the land in kind of more or less permanent cover crop, and still trying to decide long-term how to navigate, whether I hold on to that land or not. So
yeah, and the last time we chatted, it was right before a big move or a big change in your business, said kind of scaling down of production. And with that scaling down and going more part-time production, you were talking earlier, you've been using that time to grow another food business and increase food access, which I believe is a food hub. But what was it called again?
Yeah, so the food hub that I'm working for now is called Grinnell Farm to Table. And it has kind of an interesting history. But yeah, to kind of backtrack to March 2023. So I decided to scale down the farm, was running it part-time, and then kind of went through the whole summer. And then into the fall, I basically got this opportunity fell into my lap where another food hub had a rather large grant that they had to transition their food hub from being a private business to a nonprofit. And that was basically just to make sure it survived because it was not working as a business. And part of that was because the owner had it commingled with another business, and it was not working. So the person who was running that whole transition quit, and they were left in the lurch. And so I agreed to do 6 months of being the operations manager, and then ended up being the interim executive director. It was 2.5 hours away, the food hub, and I would go there once a week. It was like, I'll do this for 6 months. It was pretty well paying. That was interesting because I got to really experience how a bigger food hub runs. This is a food hub that served Omaha and Des Moines both. It's kind of where it's located is sort of halfway in between, more or less, between those two places. So it kind of served these two different metros. It's kind of the only food hub out in that area of Western Iowa. got to run their farm to school sourcing, which was grant funded. So like we were going to schools. Like I did the route one time, and it's like we were driving almost up into South Dakota to some of these schools to make deliveries. But it was all for the schools, it was all grant funded, so it was like free. But they were getting like $1,000, $2,000 orders of local food. Yeah, so I did that, and then this whole time I've been sitting on the board of Grinnell Farm to Table, and Grinnell Farm to Table went through this interesting transition where it had been just someone's business. And at one time, I was the owner of that business years ago. So it had gone through several different owners since then. And it had ended up with a couple of owners who had kind of built it up to like a better place, but they were really kind of figuring out what to do with it because they weren't paying themselves. They were basically like running it as a community service, even though it was a business, technically an LLC. So there was another nonprofit that was doing food access work where they would raise money and then buy CSAs from farms and then donate them. And that organization was in a transition, and I advocated, and other people advocated, let's merge these two. Let's merge Grinnell Farm to Table with Local Foods Connection, the nonprofit. And then Grinnell Farm to Table can operate as a nonprofit. It can keep doing what it's doing, which is basically like online farmers market, but it can also take over this food access work. And at the same time, there was this grant funding available that provided money for staffing and then a bunch of money for purchasing local food. So that transition happened in 2023, and we hired a part-time executive director. I got recruited onto the board at that point. So that was going on while I was doing this other food hub. And then when I finished that food hub work, the executive director of Grinnell Farm to Table was like, hey, I could really use help with this food hub. And like, you're going to be ending your position at Farm to Table Delivery, the other hub. So as soon as I finished that position, I started with this other food hub, Grinnell Farm to Table, much more part-time, not running the whole thing, not doing what I was doing with the larger hub. So that's what I've been doing since May. So I've kind of been doing that part-time and then doing the farm part-time.
Yeah. And how do you find that balance now, being able to do a little bit less production and spend more time on aggregation and distribution? Are you enjoying that change amidst, or even maybe even a little bit more security of not being totally dependent on your local weather to make a living?
For sure. No, I like it. Like saying it's part-time farming, part-time something else. Yeah, I appreciate it because I'm trying to run the farm as a profitable business, right? So I want the farm to make money. I want the hours I put into the farm to make a living wage, make $15 an hour if possible or more. So I'm trying to but that means I'm mostly doing the work on the farm. So I'm trying to run it part-time, but also it's mainly my work. I don't have a lot of hired help, a little bit of hired help. So I've really cut down my footprint on the farm. I'm down to basically a third of an acre plus the high tunnel. I do a plant sale in the spring because I have the greenhouse. And I'm really cut down to like 5 to 6 crops. So kind of growing a larger quantity of a smaller number of crops, and then really trying to just sell them within Grinnell if possible. And then I have been working with another hub in Iowa City a little bit because actually was aggregating with another grower, which was cool, where there was this hub in Iowa City that was selling to schools. So this was like August, September. And they were looking for big orders of cherry tomatoes, and the two of us would aggregate our orders to fill them. So like they'd give 120 pounds, I'd give 120 pounds, and then we could fill the order. I mean, and sometimes we had another grower, which is kind of a promising thing. I mean, that was just two growers working together. That wasn't through a food hub. But yeah, so I'm doing that and really just, part-time hours, 15 to 20 hours a week, kind of in the summer, and then doing the food hub for 10 to 15 hours. And that mix of things worked really well for me. I had the steady income from the food hub, but also was still getting some income from the farm. And yeah, lifestyle wise is a huge improvement over farming full time. I mean, I was able to travel. I have time to wash dishes and do laundry and take breaks and go for walks and be more available for my son and for family time. So I really like that mix of work. And so I'm hoping to continue doing that as long as I can.
And you're saying that on your farm now, you're down to about 5 crops. We can dig into that later more about what you're growing. But is the majority of that product going through the food hubs locally? Or is it through other wholesale accounts and things like that?
Yeah, so the mix of things, like a big wholesale account for me is the college here, Grinnell College. I've worked with their food service over the years, and they can just, they feed, 1,000 plus people 3 meals a day. So they can take large quantities of stuff. So, I definitely oriented some of my crops towards like growing a lot of cherry tomatoes. They'll take tons of cherry tomatoes. Greens, they can take a lot of greens at one time. So yeah, some of the crops are kind of oriented more towards that account in particular. But I mean, I also sell, kind of retail units through a local grocery store, not huge quantity, but it's steady, and they can sell my stuff. And then the food hub, similar, like not huge quantities, but kind of steady throughout the year. And then the other thing with the food hub is because they, the food hub does this food access work where they'll buy like bulk quantities of things and distribute them. Like occasionally they can buy bulk quantities of things from my farm, just like they do other farms to distribute. And actually, I can talk more about, we're wanting to do this kind of aggregated box model next year, both for like our free, shares to low-income families, but also we're thinking about just selling those as well. Which brings up some issues like, are we competing with other CSA farms? We're kind of navigating that right now. But that would allow me to like say, okay, as I'm planning that, as the, with my food hub hat on, I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna kind of plan out the box for the year, and I'm gonna say, okay, we need this many pounds of carrots over this many weeks, and then go out to our growers in our network and say, would you like to grow this? And then we just have like a bare agreement. It's like they're not tied into it. They can always, if they don't have it, they don't have it. We'll go and look farther afield, like within our food hub network. But I'm thinking basically could do that kind of with my own farm, where it's like I could grow cherry tomatoes for that. And so then I'd be able to give like bulk amounts of cherry rather than like, oh, I sold 20 pints of cherry tomatoes retail. It'd be like I would sell, 40 pounds of cherry tomatoes bulk to the food hub to then aggregate into these boxes. So, those are kind of the main ones that I said. I worked a little bit with a food hub in Iowa City where they were looking just for like large quantities of certain crops. And that was kind of facilitated through another grower.
Yeah. So along the lines of those boxes, for our listeners, food hubs do a lot of different things, offer a lot of services. Is the food hub you're managing now promptly doing wholesale, direct to other businesses? Is it doing direct consumer online sales? Logistics? What's kind of the main bread and butter of the food hub you're managing now as far as the services you offer?
The main bread and butter of it, like kind of what it was historically and still is it's an online farmers market. And it does either, it was doing monthly, kind of moving more towards bi-monthly distributions, every 2 weeks. And so that's basically just like, 20 farms put their products up, people can order whatever they want. It all gets aggregated and then people come and pick up their orders. So that's their main thing. And then because of this LFPA funding, the Local Food Procurement Assistance Program, which Iowa has in a number of states, they've just gotten a block grant of money that it's not upfront. We have to get reimbursed, but basically that where we can purchase food from producers and then donate it. And so a big thing that we've been doing is we've been buying CSAs from farms, from like 3 different farms. And then we kind of aggregate those CSAs just in the sense that we like get 10 from this farm, 15 from this farm, 5 from this farm. And then I go out and do what I was doing home deliveries every week to like 30 to 35 households. And then we would buy some stuff bulk and distribute that through pantries, through kind of free farm stands in the community, some other community access sites. So, and the kind of the box idea that I mentioned, that came out of, we've been buying CSAs from farms. There's a lot of variability in the CSAs we're getting: size, quality, what they're putting in what they're putting in. Some farms are really like heavy. Like one farm was really heavy on peppers for some reason, and then another farm was really heavy on greens. And so it was hard for me to kind of decide like how to distribute these. I was making a lot of subjective decisions, like, oh, this family has more people in it, so I'll give them this share, and this family I think would eat greens, so I'll give them this share. And I didn't like that. I wanted more uniformity. I wanted a little bit more control over what we're distributing, a little bit more quality control. And so the scheme we're working on for this next year is, rather than buying CSAs from farms, we would commit to buying certain crops from the farms, and then we would bring that in ourselves and aggregate it and pack it. And so it's going to be a little bit more labor for us up front to pack it. But I think we're capable of that. I ran a CSA for 10 years, so I kind of know how to do that. And I know how to do it efficiently. So I feel like it's very doable. And then this would allow us, we give everyone the same share. We'd be able to control it a little bit more. So kind of, we could eliminate some of the outliers where it's like, this year, this farm is giving way too many peppers. We can just, we're only going to give this amount of peppers because we can source from different farms. And then we can really leverage our food hub network. We have a statewide food hub network where we can draw food from as far away as Omaha, and then as far away as Southeast Wisconsin, through these basically like, trucking routes with the different food hubs. So we really have the opportunity, like, if one of our local growers doesn't have carrots, we can go get them. We know how to get them. through the Food Hub network. And it's like competitive prices. It's generally larger wholesale farms. So I feel like that's a big opportunity for us to have really nice kind of uniform boxes, and then also be able to do that throughout the year. And because I'm working on a year-long schedule, it wouldn't be weekly throughout the year. It might be more like monthly during the winter. But I would like to move away from this model where we only provide seasonal CSAs and do you more, because it's like people need to eat year round, right? So, and especially with our, like the low income houses we're working with, it's like, okay, we're giving them these really nice boxes May through October. And then we're like, okay, see you in 6 months. It's like, we're kind of leaving them in the lurch, right? For the winter. So I'm like, can we spread this out a little bit more across the year? So that's one. And then that we would be able to sell these boxes as well. In addition to, we have this funding to give these away for free, but thinking about long-term sustainability, I think there would be a market for this sort of CSA in Grinnell in particular. And so we're thinking about, could we sell those to our community? And then, that obviously provides income to the nonprofit, which helps subsidize some of our other work.
Yeah. And you were saying about, with sourcing CSA boxes and inconsistency or just the variation of product that comes off farms. And if you're running a Food Hub business, when things go wrong, people come to you for the solution, for the issue. And like, it's hard to really bring a lot of product together and then not be accountable for the quality of the product itself that you're then distributing.
Yes.
You can really get in some like pickles. Like I've my own business, I run an aggregated CSA as well. And, we've been burned where, we've bought product from somebody, it shows up and it's not as descripted, it's damaged. And you're like, well, it has to go out tomorrow and my name's on it. So you end up eating that cost. But being able to have better control, especially in the food business, is really, I think, really essential.
Yeah, but like what you're bringing up is a huge issue, because it's even an issue just with when we're selling through the retail market. If someone, and then they show up and it's not great quality, it's like, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to say no to the producer and reject it and not pay them? Are we going to say yes and pay them and then kind of like try to smooth over the customer? Are we going to like allow the customer to say no and then eat that cost? Yeah, that's tough. I think that's tough when it's not just like your farm, you're producing it, you make the decisions. And so the quality control piece, and like part of it is, getting to know our local farms a little bit and kind of figuring out what they're good at and what they're not good at. And then kind of being able to, I'm hoping to leverage that knowledge to be like, hey, I think you're good at growing this. I think you're good at growing this. And then like, I'm going to buy this from you. And then also, I think part of that is I want to encourage our local farms to get better at growing the things they're good at, and to maybe think about moving away from the hyper diversity, of like trying to grow everything. Because it's like, clearly I can tell like you're kind of better at this, whether it's your soil, your labor, whatever it is that makes it so and I know that's the case with my farm. Like I was always better at growing certain things than other things. And I've kind of just tried to lean into the things that I'm good at and just drop the things that I'm not good at growing. And I think, when you're not trying to be the everything farm, you can just source what's good from it. And then I think potentially you have a better quality, because like you're getting the best product from every farm versus like the CSA box might represent the best to worst. There's kind of a spectrum within that. I mean, some farms just do a good job across the board, but the other part of this box model, and I think this is like similar to what you're doing, is like having the add-ons too. So you have the produce as the base, the base share. But like with the free boxes that we were doing, all the producers were providing eggs as well, because they all happen to be egg producers. We had a milk add-on, and then we also would occasionally do meat distributions and honey as well. And so we'd like to, because we have this funding, we'd like to do that, because we're thinking of it as like a little bit more of a whole diet, especially for people with like people with food insecurity. Like we don't want to just give you a box of vegetables. Like that's great, but that's not enough. We'd like to give protein and like be able to affect people's, diets and budget a little bit more. But then also like seeing the opportunity with doing that with paid customers too, being able to like give them this base model of an aggregated box, but then also they can layer in these add-ons.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think offering those add-ons really increases the value of the overall product. And it, especially if you're charging delivery fees or whatever, it's like, it just removes one last step for the end consumer who's trying to access local foods. They might already, they might want produce, but they want honey as well. They might not drive an extra 10 minutes to a farm stand to get honey on top of that. But if they click one button and it shows up with the order they're getting, chances are you can increase that overall basket spend and push towards profitability.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, like, because I think, yeah, that's one of the downfalls of local food can be like, well, I got to go here to get this. I got to go here and that's like what the food hub can do is it kind of brings people together, in terms of like, it's one stop to get a bunch of different things. But yeah, I think that's like, yeah, trying to, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about like, some farms moving into wholesale and, my feeling about that is like, there's already these established businesses there's grocery stores, right? And grocery stores are already like people's general mode of buying food is going to the grocery store. That's like everyone's general mode of buying food. And then other modes of buying food are maybe a little bit like alternative. And that there's like, becoming a regular food hub customer is like, you're having to like develop an alternative habit. And it's not replacing the grocery store, right? Like, I don't know of very many people who are like completely replacing that. By like buying local food. So like trying to become more convenient. Yeah. I mean, this is like, I think this is a big thing about that COVID drove was like convenience and trying to meet people where they're at rather than, and I think a lot of the local food movement prior to COVID and still in a lot of ways is like, you got to jump through this hoop and you got to come at this time if you really want the good stuff. And it's like, it's not a good way to build a business or to grow a market. You have to like really try to meet people where they're at. So
I totally agree. If you want to expand that sales base of customers, and I joke around with people all the time. I feel like we've been selling the same like 10 granola people since like the 90s on repeat. And like now, if we want to grow the industry of local food, we have to like bring in just normal people who just want good food.
And who aren't willing to jump through all those hoops and aren't willing to do a lot of extra work. And it's like, because part of it is like, they're and I know like Chris Newman has talked about this, like there's a lot of the virtue, where it becomes like kind of, it's like, well, if you're really virtuous, you'll do it. And it's like, no, I don't want to be promoting that. It's like, because I experienced some of those same things myself as like an eater. Like, I'm not like, just because I grow food on a farm or like it doesn't mean that I'm like always willing to jump through those hoops either. Like, I also want convenience and to be, like have things be easier, especially as I've gotten older and have a family, have a little less time. So like, I relate to that. I'm not like, someone who is like, rendering all my own fat and like putting up all my preserves for the year. Like, I know people who are doing that, but like, that's never been my lifestyle. So.
Yeah. And if we really want to market to folks who want to eat better, but like all of us, time poverty is a serious issue for everyone involved. And you really have to make that accessing that product just one step easier. And I feel like we said earlier, just through the online model, again, I'm biased because I'm also a user of online local food sales, but just being able to, if you're able to give people the value proposition successfully of local food that looks like the photos that's online, they click it and pick up the bag of produce that's similar, maybe a little more expensive than the grocery store, but close in price. If you can knock down all those walls, make it as convenient as possible, then like you might have a shot of like being not as convenient, but as usable as someone who walks to the grocery store and just buys their other items. You might be able to compete a tiny bit. But if your only way you're going to sell to somebody is like, if you come to my farm on Wednesday from 1 to 2, and you have to email me ahead of time, and you know what I mean? It's like all those little things like that.
You got to pay cash or whatever.
Yeah. It's just like, I mean, for our CSA, one thing we changed recently this year is that like we linked up a service that sends people a text message when the CSA order is ready. It used to send them an email, and that was fine. But I started noticing like maybe about 3 to 5% of like orders not getting picked up after a while. I said, let me just add the text message option. And when I did that, I mean, it went away completely.
Oh, that's
people
cool.
have their phones on 24/7. Text message goes off, it goes bleep. Your CSA order's ready, and they know it's ready, and they show up. And just that one little change of making it a little more accessible, more convenient, is enough to just keep some customers on the hook.
Yeah, no, and that's like, it's a huge thing with, again, because like people's baseline is like going to the grocery store, which is like you go there, there's no pre-ordering. There's no reminders. You don't have to remember anything. You can just like, oh, I need dinner. I'll go to the grocery store. So like, if that's the kind of baseline, it's like, yeah, like the model we're having, we're like, yeah, you got to kind of remember. You have to remember to place your order. Like giving those nods and those nudges to like help people, because it's a little bit of an unnatural or way for people to like access food, given like how our society works and generally how people get food. So yeah, no, I think, any way to sort of like help with that, the remembering when you have to pick up or you have to order, because that's a huge thing with like the retail side of our hub is like regular email reminders, like, hey, orders are closing. And like when we do those, like how much our order volume improves when we're like really regular with getting the emails out, doing the reminders. Cause like even me as like, again, as like a consumer, I forget to order. I'm helping run the food hub and I forget to order. So it's like, if I'm forgetting to order, then obviously other people are forgetting to order, and then I'm sure they're like, oh, I would have ordered, but I never remember. And that's like who we want to capture. We want to get people in the habit of like, they would be ordering, but there's this barrier, or there's this little bit of friction, so it's like, how do we like lessen that friction? Because it's like, those are people who would, we're not even trying to like bring in people who are like recalcitrant about buying local food. It's like people who want to buy local food, but are just like a little too busy, right? Or like a little, yeah.
It's two things. It's training and routinization. It's first you got to train people that like, hey, you can access local food, whether through the farm stand, CSA, market, whatever it is. You can come here also based, not, it's every Thursday, Friday. It's consistent. It happens every week. Since we said earlier about, just not running the CSA from May through October, by the time people get used to it, it's now done.
Right.
You've trained them all year long. Pick up every Wednesday at the farm, and then now it stops, and now you hit basically the routine is broken, and then 6 months later you train them all over again.
Yep.
So yep. It's definitely a process, but I think much of that is that also is consistency, is being there every single week, because like Walmart's always open on Saturdays. There's always someone there. Even the manager's sick, the Walmart's still open. So,
yeah, it's like that's what we're competing against. That is like, that's the baseline. Yeah, so we have to like, and I think it's just trying to meet people where they're at. Yeah, and I think what you said about routinization, we're moving more towards. I've been encouraging in our executive director who kind of runs the retail. He's like receptive to this, but like, let's just do every 2 weeks throughout the year, because we were doing like every 2 weeks during the summer, but then we go to monthly during the winter. And part of that is like, I think, again, like a lot of the mentality around local food has been driven by seasonal produce, that like seasonal produce sets the schedule. And then like local food is so much more than seasonal produce. There's meat, there's grains, there's dairy, there's eggs. There's a lot of things that are like fairly steady availability across the year. And those are also like the proteins, people that like, that stuff that is a big part of people's diets, not just produce. And so I think expanding the idea of local food beyond produce, not having produce like sort of set the table for everything else. And so I think, like, let's go throughout the year. And then we were having this conversation earlier about like farm stands and how those are kind of like very highly seasonal. And like, like farmers markets are often highly seasonal. So people often have a lot of options for local food during the growing season. And then all of a sudden it's winter and then those options just disappear. So if you're a food hub that's like, no, we're throughout the year, we're consistent. Like we actually find that our sales go up during the winter because there's fewer options for people. So like having that, being able to go throughout the year and having that consistency and routine. And then if we capture those customers over the winter, they might just stay with us throughout the year.
No, I totally agree with you on that. Especially, when you in the winter, there's not a lot of competition, and if you can secure those customers in January and February and March, then the time spring rolls around, they're the first ones in line to shop with you. And especially here locally, I do my own food hub. I talk to other food hubs. Same thing. Their winter sales are their highest sales of the year, because. And I think part of it too is then, those few people who are local foodies, when those sources dry up, they swarm to the few that they can hold on to their product for. And I was talking to a lot of growers, and you talked about it earlier, but like the ability to aggregate, let's say, carrots, potatoes, onions, some of those big bulk crops around the edge. I tell growers, like, if you can get a little hoop, just run some spinach, maybe some baby kale, you could easily do a year-round box with other aggregated products dumped in there, a few fresh greens on top, and really could have a nice business that captures customers, and not only captures customers, but it's a good marketing tool to get you ready before the season really starts and get sell CSAs or even get customers before the market really fills up.
And I think from a grower perspective, like I was Ben Hartman, who wrote The Lean Farm, and talked about this about like leveling your load across the year. So like the produce farms like really peak in the summer and then nothing in the winter. And so like trying to and that's what I was really trying to do that. Even when I was full-time farming, is like, I stopped doing a summer CSA because I was like, a lot of people are traveling. This is the hardest time of year to like, for me, it's like the hottest time of year. It was like the hardest time of year to be outside and be really going full bore. So I was really trying to move more into shoulder seasons, like spring and fall. And that also kind of fit more with the school calendar, which again, when I was growing for the college, it's like their demand is September through May, not the summer. So could I kind of shift my load? And then also, there's a lot of demand in the fall. People are coming back from the semester from the college and also just like school year. So I was already kind of moving in that direction. And yeah, so I see the benefit of kind of load leveling where you're not trying to make all your income in the summer off of like these highly perishable summer crops. You're like spreading it out more. And then I think as a grower, I appreciate the winter growing and like storage crops because it's like, it's not that highly perishable. Everything's got to move this week. I have spinach in the high tunnel, a ton of spinach in there. It's not going to go bad next week. Like it's not going to bolt. It's just in the freezer, right? Or it's in the fridge. And so I can harvest that across the whole season. And then, I didn't manage to grow storage carrots, but my intention is to grow, a few thousand pounds of storage carrots next year. Same thing. I can just sell those 100 pounds a week over the winter. I don't have to sell 1,000 pounds at a time. So that really levels my load. And then especially when I'm trying to be part-time and I don't want to be, working 40 hours a week and I'm only going to have 15 to 20 hours, like just doing smaller amounts across a longer period of time really fits that lifestyle a little bit more. So yeah, I think, getting into storage crops, getting into winter growing, maybe de-emphasizing the summer crops a little bit, I think has a lot of potential for both from a grower perspective and from the local food, the food hub and the consumer perspective.
And you said it too. One thing I want to add about the height of summer production is that like that's when all the farms have product available. Like even the worst
all the
farmers,
home gardeners too.
Yes, yeah.
All the home, because that's like in rural Iowa, it's like everyone's got a garden, and so you're also like people are giving away tomatoes or giving away zucchini, and then you're competing with that. It's like very few people are got cold frames growing spinach in the winter, right? So
yeah, no, totally. And it's like I see all the time, like even like the worst farmer can like get like a table of tomatoes in like September. You know what I mean? Like, so especially for us, like, you have a lot of market gardeners competing against already established, let's say, older truck farm type businesses, who their entire season is that bell curve, right? It's that June through October, and then they shut down, and then we'll be back in the spring. And if you can really pick at the edges and maximize, all the power of either tunnel, season extension, anything like that, just get a few weeds on the end there. I think that's where the money's at, especially on the small scale.
Yeah, no, and that makes a ton of sense, especially when you're competing. Like in my area, it's like we don't really have the truck farms, so I've never had that competition. But yeah, like especially when you're competing with truck farms, home gardeners, like peak produce season, like like the shoulder seasons are really where it's at. And that's like with the plant sales is another thing that I'm continuing to do, and that's a great early spring income stream, and it's pretty like fairly profitable enterprise in terms of like the hours I put in, and then what I'm able to sell things for. And then I'm able to like sell produce at the same time. So a little bit of like doing some on-farm sales, like people come to buy the plants and then I can sell a little bit of produce with that. But that's also something that I'd always done even when I was doing CSA and stuff. But now I'm like emphasizing it more because I'm not doing the CSA anymore. And so I'm trying to like build that out a little bit. And so, that's kind of the one on-farm sales that I do where people actually come to the farm. And I had been doing like pre-orders. This is kind of a COVID thing. And in 2020, I did pre-orders and home delivery, and we delivered like 100 orders of plants. So it's like it's really hard to pack. It was insane. I mean, a friend basically did it with a pickup truck, and she probably did like 10 trips, back and forth all day long. So I did that for a few years, but then I've just kind of gone to, no, you actually I am kind of doing the thing where, no, you actually have to come to the farm to do it. But it works because people want it, because it's like, it is highly seasonal. That's always going to be highly seasonal, getting plants. And I don't really have a lot of competition, especially like organic. If people want like organic starts or like interesting starts, heirloom starts, they can't get them at the big box stores or even the local nurseries. So I really have a niche there. And then I've been trying to figure out like hours, like, do I just want to do, like a couple weekends? Do I want to have like more open hours? Like I'm trying to find the balance there of like convenience and then also my time, I don't want to be at the farm. I don't want to be at the farm like open like 3 days a week or something. I don't think I want to commit that much time to it. But am I losing sales if I do that? I'm kind of trying to figure that out. Yeah.
And especially if you can have like one larger span of labor to put into this project, like it's a few weekends or it's a month, or I'm better, but it's a very tight time. We're going to hit it hard. We're going to move this product, and then we're going to go back to our other lower labor types of ways of selling product.
Yep. yeah, it is a little bit like I was saying, like not having the peak in the summer. Well, it is kind of a peak, but it's like, it's also just a different time of year and it's a little bit shorter, more discreet. Cause like really that selling, it's interesting, like selling plants over the years, like it is a tight window. It's highly seasonal. It's affected by the weather. If you have a cold spring, it pushes everything back. The demand goes like this and just crashes, like it's like, it like goes up into late May. And then kind of once June hits, like demand just kind of crashes. And it's like, sometimes I've just kind of stuck with plants and I'm just trying to get rid of them. So it kind of makes me appreciate the like volatility of the nursery business, like because of its seasonality. But it still works out well again, because I think I have that, that niche of what I'm growing, and it's not really available in other places. So.
And you said it earlier, but the opportunity to, when they come and purchase plants, it's not only a great time to connect, you said sell some produce, but it's kind of like running that winter CSA. You can kind of get people really early in the spring. And then if, granted, they're growing their own food, getting nursery starts, but, we're all imperfect growers, things fail, things don't work. And they know that, I can get spinach or whatever from Middle Way when I stop buying down plants. It just puts it in people's mind a little better, I think.
Yeah, for sure. No, it definitely helps with that connection. And yeah, and I've been trying to think about how to layer in other things. Like, can I kind of collaborate with the food hub, bring them in? Can I bring in another, grower or collaborator to, sell something at the same time? Or, like how could I make that, how can I build out the plant sale without necessarily like building up my work or me having to do everything? Like I'd been talking with a friend who grows trees, maybe him bringing like fruit trees rather than like me starting that as an enterprise, as part of the sale. So I've been thinking a little bit more about that. And it is really, it's an event. Like it's, people like to come. It's like people get to talk to it. It's a social event, there's a big part of it was what I've noticed. And so there's a real benefit to having it on the farm in person, having it feel a little bit more like, I always have like donuts and like coffee and like I try to make it a little bit more of like an event versus like, a nursery where it's like, we just have open hours and you come and buy stuff,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You really need to stack those functions, especially if you have people come out to your location. You and not to sound like a dirty capitalist, but you just gotta like give them a place to go and then places to spend their money when they show up.
I mean, it's true though.
Exactly. Yeah. If they're coming to your farm, they're coming there because they support local, they support farming, and they support small growers. And like, I don't know. There's a lot worse things people can spend their money on than, small scale growers and their products. But I have a friend of mine who has a nursery business as well on his farm. It's the same thing. They're adding like a little jerky stand with like cheeses and, little meats like that. Little things like that. They're putting little campfire out there so people can, and little picnic tables and coffee, whatever. But just to make people's experience there a little bit more whole. We talked about it earlier too. I think our previous conversation we talked about it, but I feel like especially post-COVID, people are really big on events. They're big on going out, restaurants, all stuff like that. So people really want to spend those local food dollars, but they might not always be cooking as much at home or buy as much CSA shares or buying much produce, but they might come to an event and spend more money to to have the farm feel and to see their farmer and get back spinach or something.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think like there are like different types of people, with like the way they approach farmers market or any of these things where like, there's like the grocery shoppers where they're like, here's my list, and we go and then I go home and cook. And then there's the people who are just like, oh, that looks good, I'll get that. That like they're there. It's more of a social event. They're maybe not as committed to like cooking or like particular things. They're not looking for particular things, but they just like the stuff looks really good. They like, seeing things that are like really high quality and getting to like, just having, and I've really come to, I think post-COVID, I've come to just really value that type of those type of social events, and just getting people together in person, like just has a lot of inherent value. Like we've been doing that a little bit more with the food hub too, where we have our pre-orders, where like people pre-order and then come pick up. And there's obviously a social aspect to that too, but we've also been doing like open markets there as well. And so we actually have a plan for next year. It's like, we're going to do X number of open markets. We're going to have a theme for each one. And so like, I'm going to do like a cider pressing at one. We might do like some like tomatoes. So we'll have some sort of demo. So that's like bringing people in, and then we'll have the open market where people just come. And actually we had vendors come. So like vendors were kind of there selling their stuff a little bit like farmers market, but then we also had products from people who weren't there. And then as part of that, we've also been doing like kind of a free farm stand or a pay what you can model. So this kind of layers in with our food access work where like people come and we don't even necessarily have prices on everything, like with produce and eggs. And then they go to the checkout stand and they kind of like name their price. And we have like a reference for it. And there's some kinks to it. It's kind of slow at the checkout. There's definitely things we can work on. But what it allows us to do is that like part of it is it from from a perspective of like a social perspective, like it allows us to kind of combine our customer bases, which is like we have our low income households, people who generally get free food from us. And then we have like our more affluent customers who buy, and it's like they get to be in the same space and they're on kind of equal footing in that space. It's like everyone's doing the same thing. And so I really like that aspect of it. And so that's something we're definitely trying to do with the food hub is like doing these social events, partly because like, they work, we can make money at them. They're a good way to distribute food, but also because like, especially as a nonprofit, I feel like, what is our mission? Well, like our mission is partly to like create community around food and like getting people in person showing up to events is like part of doing that. So,
and I like the idea of having everybody together at once. It really destigmatizes, going to get food, and which can be hard for some people. I understand. I've been in spots, and it's hard to ask for help when you need something. At my market, it's really cool. All our food assistance programs, or EBT, food stamps, stuff like that. It's a token based product. And then also do the same thing for our debit cards. So debit cards also tokens. So everyone has tokens. Everyone's spending tokens. It's totally normalized. Makes it totally easy to use, and make sure it tries to help make sure that these local food places don't just become kind of places just for the elite and those who can afford to spend $8 on a bunch of kale.
For sure. And that's how our farmers market is the same, the token system. And I really like how they set that up. Yeah, because it destigmatizes, like, because you're just giving a token from a distance. You don't know if that's an EBT token or a debit token. And so, just like just normalizes that. It makes people feel, because there's a lot of stigma. Like there's a lot of stigma around people feeling poor, being perceived as poor, asking for help. And like we found even like, at these pay what you can farm stands, like everyone pays something. Like very few, because we're like totally like, hey, if you want to take stuff, take stuff. Like we honestly, we don't care. Like we're offering this as like it truly is pay what you can. If you don't want to pay anything, just take it. Like we're just happy for people to have this food. But like almost everyone pays something because it's like, when you give people the option, they like, there's pride. Like people have pride and like, no, I can pay something. I'm going to pay something. And we thought we were really strongly considering a sliding scale for our aggregated box because we kind of feel like, we're doing this free. We still have the funding, or we will have the funding to do the free boxes. And I really like that because it's like zero barrier, like just, hey, it's free. And we're not trying to like evaluate, well, could you pay this much or that much? But like, if we're really thinking about the sliding scale in terms of, could people or who are kind of in that in-between space, or not necessarily affluent, not necessarily like right at the poverty line, but somewhere in between where they can't pay $500 for a CSA, but they could pay $200. Like, can we kind of like capture those people in terms of like, they're maybe at an income level where they're like, well, I don't give me the free stuff, but they're not going to buy the full price. So we're trying to figure that out because we want to make it. There's just like a spectrum of people, there's like a spectrum of abilities to pay. And so like, and that would just help with our sustainability too, rather than it's like, it's either free or full price. Like, can we find if there's an in-between space, and then that'll help us cover more of our costs.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. If you grow plants, you know that to a farm of any size, your soil is your most steadfast partner, an asset worthy of investing in. Since 1972, Ohio Earth Food has been the go-to source for the highest performing and most cost-effective granular and liquid fertilizers, seed starting soils, foliar sprays, and disease and insect controls, all approved for use on organic farms. They deliver them right to your farm too. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in their Plant Pro and the Seed Catapult potting soils, and put their ReVita fertilizers in your soil before you plant, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. These natural blends utilize compost, kelp, and humate, and are low salt index safe for high tunnels. Feed your soils and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com, now with branches in Ohio and Wisconsin. ohioearthfood.com. All right, back to the show.
So maybe a little bit of switch, talk about infrastructure for the food hub. Where's it located, and what kind of like cooler space, dots? How do you manage the actual food hub itself?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, because we're working on some stuff right now, but basically we rent a space that it was a former service station, so it kind of has a garage that's been turned into a room but you can kind of see where the double doors used to be. So there's kind of like a garage area that's got a concrete floor with a floor drain, and some big windows and like a double door. It's like we don't really do pallets right now. It's also like the parking lot's kind of uneven. It'd be like tough to do pallets. So we're doing a lot of carrying stuff in, but we've got space where like, a truck, at least like certainly a reefer truck can pull up next to the door and we can unload. Right now and then there's kind of an office area to the side, or like office retail area in the front. And then we have a bathroom. So and then we actually have a sink area too, like a 3-bottom sink. And it had been like a barbecue place. It had been a smoothie shop. It was most recently like a screen printing place, or like a print shop. So it's gone through all these iterations. But it's a good space for us. It's a little bit, it might end up being a little bit small as we grow, but like right now it's totally adequate. But yeah, right now we're running off of like multiple chest freezers, multiple upright coolers. We've gotten like some reach-in coolers this year, but we did get a grant. All the food hubs kind of combined in an application for the RFSI, which is Resilient Food System, the USDA grant, which is kind of a post-COVID thing where it's like they're trying to like build up resilient, more infrastructure, more local, small scale infrastructure, like, slaughterhouses, meat packing, reefer trucks, just to kind of like help beef out the local distribution system. And so we got that grant. And so we're building a walk-in cooler freezer combo that'll kind of take up almost like half of that room, or like 1/3 of that room. But it'll be great because we'll be able to get rid of all these individual like chest freezers and coolers, maybe keep, 1 or 2. And then it's actually going to have reach-in doors. So we could kind of retail out of that. And also like when they're packing, our executive director runs retail, is like, well, I really want those doors because when we have people coming in to pack, volunteers or staff packing, they can just have stuff in the cooler and you just reach in and grab stuff out of the cooler. But then it's also a walk-in cooler, so we can, and then that will allow us to do some more storage, especially with, storage crops over the winter. So we could like pre-buy storage crops and like kind of stock up the cooler a little bit. And I have some interest in that. Like, from my perspective, like if I grow a bunch of carrots, maybe like the food hub would buy half of them and store them or something like that. And the food hub I worked with actually did a lot of that. They did a lot of worked with Amish growers who had no storage capacity. And so they would just buy a lot of stuff up front and then they would store it, because otherwise it was in like a barn.
Yeah.
So, and there was definitely pitfalls of that because you got a lot of money sunk in, and like you can go too far and you end up with too much, and then you're dealing with spoilage and stuff. But yeah, so that's going to be a big improvement for us. Yeah, we're like, I would like to move, and that I always think we kind of move in the direction of like palletizing things and moving that direction, but we're not going to be able to do that. And I think we're not quite at the scale to do that yet, but the walk-in cooler should help some with efficiency. And then part of it is like getting the walk-in cooler will help us kind of eliminate a lot of the individual coolers and freezers. But then it's also it does leave the question of like, okay, we want to keep that thing full though, right? We don't want it to be like empty. So that it pushes us a little bit. So that's like with the food box program, it's like, okay, let's kind of push the food box program like through the winter. Let's maybe buy more storage crops. Let's have more regular cycles. So it's a situation where it's like, is the cart leading the horse or the horse leading the cart? Like, I don't want us to be like driven to do stuff because we've got this infrastructure that we got for like free or for low cost because of a grant. But I think it just makes sense. It's part of a natural evolution that we want to be more year round. We want to be more consistent. We want to use our assets, our infrastructure more effectively. We don't want to be sitting empty, so how can we like use it more often? And then there's the potential to collaborate with other organizations like food recovery and stuff, where it's like they might be able to use our coolers. And we actually, when I was working for the other food hub, we had an interesting collaboration with a food nonprofit in Des Moines that basically like rented warehouse space from the city of Des Moines, this massive warehouse where they would store like snow plows and tractors and stuff, huge heated warehouse, like 30-foot ceilings and like almost like probably close to an acre, if not bigger. And they rented a little bay of that. And then they had some walk-in coolers and freezers in there, but it was cool because multiple organizations used it. It was kind of like this, like we used it as a food hub. They used it for food rescue. Other organizations would come in and pack CSAs out of there. So it was like this multi-use space and like everyone got to use the cooler. And so it's a little chaotic, sometimes it's like, it's like label your stuff in the cooler or like, write stuff down. So like managing that is a little bit chaotic, but I really liked it as a model because it was like they kind of hosted the infrastructure and then they let a lot of other people use it, and that kept it well utilized. And so I can definitely see us getting this infrastructure as like we can then kind of offer this to the community, on an ad hoc basis or maybe like a regular partnership. And I think that's kind of the point of the grant, was like to create infrastructure that then can contribute to like community vitality, right? So
Yeah, and I feel like anytime you increase your refrigeration space, like it just opens opportunities to make more deals, to add more product. Like, it does feel bad sometimes to have like just a huge cooler running, there's like a little box in the corner, but then like out of nowhere, you get like, oh, now it's full of apples now. Like we had a deal out of nowhere and now it's totally full. And if we didn't have that option, then we would have been totally screwed, when it and it was funny you said earlier about that balance of, buying things ahead to store, to then resell and taking on that risk, because it is a real risk. And even on my own operation, we built a lot more cooler space, thinking, okay, we're going to buy a lot more product ahead of time. And yeah, that really helped get our price down of the product. But man, the management and having to worry about spoilage and like how many times we've had like a whole walk-in full of like roots and the power goes out. And you're just like, oh no, you got to run down your generators going like that. But it is having the opportunity to store stuff really is I think really the key, not only for a farm, but especially for a food hub. And you need to have that flexibility of you have all that refrigeration space.
yeah, no, it's a good point. It's like sometimes you get the fluctuations where sometimes it's empty, sometimes it's really full, but just like having that capacity available is important. And I think like recently we did turkeys and like we were kind of scrambling. Like we actually had the college stored the turkeys for us like over the weekend because it was 30 turkeys. Our chest freezers are pretty full, but if we have a walk-in freezer, that's no issue at all. So like something like that is just easy. So yeah, definitely it will help with those kind of seasonal fluctuations or like big, one-off big purchases. And then even just like, I don't know how much you've worked with like meat and chest freezers, but it's like, it's so hard to keep it organized, versus like having stuff on shelves at eye level. So that will just be a big, it'll help us with inventory, like particularly meat, because we've been carrying a lot of meat inventory. We've kind of been moving in this mode of where we buy whole animals and then we distribute it through food access. Like a lot of the pantries, we through this grant funding, we will provide meat to the pantries, which is fantastic, to be able to provide like protein. And then also we resell through the retail hub, and that it helps with pricing, because we can buy the whole animal, get a pretty decent price, and then we do our markup, and then it's like pretty competitive. Although we do have an issue with like, are we undercutting our meat producers? So, it's like we've had this debate recently, but yeah, being able to buy whole animals and then sell by the cut is like really great. And so having a walk-in freezer in particular will help with that, being able to organize it, inventory, being able to pull orders, make that a lot easier.
You were saying earlier that, majority of a base for most food hubs or food businesses is that seasonal veg. But it sounds like at the food hub there, you're doing a lot of value added products, or not value, as a lot of additional products that aren't vegetables. Is the proteins and dairies like that, are those large portions of your sales, or is still the produce kind of the main sale?
That's a good question. Yeah, without looking at the numbers, I know certainly for our food access, we were like, and we were kind of unusual compared to the other hubs. A lot of the other hubs were much more produce. Like I feel like did more protein at ours. And I think that just might be kind of, the way we were operating and the kind of the producers we have in our network too, is like we maybe have few more meat producers who are like capable of, or just, we can buy whole animals versus like, we kind of have a lot more smaller vegetable producers, so they can't quite produce in quantity as much. So that's kind of the food access side. We're pretty protein forward with that. And then, from the retail side, I'd say it's probably a little bit more even, but yeah, we definitely sell a lot of meat. I mean, we're definitely kind of known as like a place where you can get good meat, which again is like, there's not a whole lot of places to do that. The grocery stores have like good butcher shops, but it's not local. We can't get grass fed. A lot of people are looking for grass fed beef in particular. And like, we kind of have a niche there. Eggs are a huge one for us too. And then we do have a dairy producer that's like, we're the only way to get that dairy. So like, I definitely think we are maybe a little bit more like protein heavy food hub, than most. But yeah, the seasonal produce is definitely an important part of that. But yeah, I think that's like, and that's partly maybe why we've also moved in this direction in our thinking too, is that we're like, maybe we were a little less produce reliant than other food hubs. And so that's made us think more about like, well, why are we like making our schedule around produce, in particular? Whereas like for other food, it may make more sense because that is that, they're not really selling many proteins. So like, yeah, that makes sense that they're going to be more seasonal or, even though we've talked about, obviously you can extend the season with storage and, and then so many more people have high tunnels too. Like we have this producer now who's like got several high tunnels and has a ton to sell over the winter. And it's like, we'll have produce all winter, even from our local, our within our county, much less within the Food Hub network. We'll certainly be able to find local food, local produce.
Quick little question about how you organize the Food Hub and maybe kind of the back end of it. Is it a system where the growers list what they have available and then, customers purchase and they deliver and then you deliver and you sell your own items on there? Is it always open? How does the Food Hub itself organize itself?
Yeah. So the way the retail side is organized is, we were using this kind of open source software that we recently transitioned away from. So now we're using Local Food Marketplace. And that's partly because like there's kind of been a push in Iowa for like every food hub to use Local Food Marketplace and trying to integrate the food hubs. And they've actually created a functionality where like there's several producers who sell into multiple food hubs. And now they can manage their inventory across multiple food hubs, which I think is a good, potentially a good tool. So we're using that now. And so, it is people basically, create their own products, upload pictures, set their price. We have a markup. So then the customer sees the markup, and then the producer sets the price they want. Then knowing that that's going to be marked up, 25% is our basic markup for retail. So that's kind of how retail works. And then we do a little bit of buying and reselling too. And actually we do a lot less of that than the hub I used to work for. That hub did a lot of buying and reselling. We do it mainly with meat, because we've been buying whole animals, and that's kind of been driven by the food access program in particular. And with the food access program, they don't allow you to sell bacon or steaks. Those are like higher end meats, right? So we end up with a ton of steaks, for example. So we've been selling steaks. We did like a steak bundle, which actually sold pretty well this cycle. And the distribution is happening today. So we do that with something like buying whole animals. We'll kind of distribute a lot of like the, especially like ground beef, or like ground pork or pork chops. Those will kind of go to the pantries through this grant funded food access program. And then the parts of the animal that we can't sell, or we have extra of, we sell through the retail market. And then we do a little bit of, we kind of check in with our local producers and kind of see what they have, particularly for produce. And then if there's kind of gaps, particularly in the winter, we'll go and buy like a few cases of carrots, a few cases of beets, a few cases of onions, winter squash, and then we'll resell that. And we might, there's some consistency issues where it's like sometimes we're selling it. This is like a Grinnell farm to table product, where it's like, if you read the description, it will say it's from this farm. And then other times we'll be selling it under that farm's name. So this is a B&B Farm product, even though B&B Farm is not curating that inventory, we are. So like, that's, something I think I noticed this with the other Food Hub too, is like you kind of had a mix of producers handling their inventory and then like Food Hub handling the inventory. And so, that's it, and so there can be conflicts with pricing or, how to do that. But that's basically how that works.
Right now, how do you handle that pack day and distribution? Do farmers pack the bags when they get there? Do you have volunteers? And then who's handling the delivery of the product itself?
Yeah. So, but for the retail side, it's pretty much all pickup at the location. And it's a great location. It's right downtown, right next to a grocery store, right on the main road. And pretty much everyone is, it's in Grinnell, town about 10,000 people. Pretty much all the customers are from Grinnell. There's maybe a few outside people. There's a home delivery option. And so I've noticed maybe like 5 people do that out of like 70 orders. They're just like, I'm out of town, I need home delivery. And that again is a little bit of a COVID relic of home delivery, but we're not, for the retail side, at least it's all pickup. And then Tommy, our executive director, he kind of runs the pickup days. We have like an intern, usually have an intern and then volunteers. So he actually has been doing volunteers and he gets pretty consistent volunteers. So they're kind of trained in and they know how to do it. And so, basically like producers will all drop off today. And then there's a little bit of a gap between when drop off ends and when orders start being distributed. And during that time, that's when they like pack most of the orders. But then as people come in, they'll just kind of say, this is my name, and they'll go in the back, grab the order, bring it out front. If they have to like finish packing it, sometimes it's already packed, and then they'll pay there. So that's kind of how the retail end works. For the food access side, with the CSAs, as I mentioned, the CSAs would get dropped off. And then sometimes we would have to do a little bit of packing. Like we were being pretty generous to the growers in the sense of like, sometimes they would just kind of drop off like 6 different items and then we would pack it for them, and it was partly like we were trying to like help them out. And so that's partly why, like I said, moving to that aggregated box model doesn't feel like that much of a stretch to me because we were already kind of like doing some of that packing for the growers anyway. But some growers would come and it's like, here's the share, it's all packed. And then other growers would be like, here's 5 different items, and then we got to put it together. So, so we would do, we get the CSAs dropped off, and then we would do some packing, and then we would home deliver that. So that was all home delivery, and it was like, 35 households every week. It was about 2 to 2.5 hours of home delivery every week. And we kind of debated. We had maybe one person pick up because they live out of town. We debated like, should we move back to pick up but part of it is like, again, we're trying to meet people where they're at. We find the home delivery is like, we get it to people. We make sure we get it to them. It's convenient. So I think, we'll probably continue to stick with the home delivery for that particular side of things. I have a vehicle, from the farm that I can use. I kind of like that I get to use it, for that, because it's like, I bought this vehicle to do home delivery for CSAs, and like now I'm still able to like utilize it that way, which is good from my perspective. And because it's all in Grinnell and I'm like fairly efficient, like to me, it's like, it takes like, this was similar to when I was doing home delivery in town for CSAs, like 3 to 4 minutes per stop. I think it's like pretty fast, pretty efficient. So I feel like it's doable. It doesn't feel like too onerous to me. So yeah, next year we'll have a little bit more packing, because if we're going to do aggregation, we're going to have a little bit more packing. But, again, I think that will just kind of be an early afternoon, and then we'll do deliveries like in the late afternoon. And then, for pantry drops, we would kind of, get stuff in, bulk stuff. And then, I would go deliver that. We just deliver to a pantry in town. And then there's like 3 pantries in rural towns, throughout the county, probably like, half hour to 40-minute round trip drive. And we try to, have a fairly significant order if we're going there. We try to bring, like 50 to 100 pounds of meat and maybe some produce, rather than just kind of like running out like 10 pounds of meat or something. And so that's going to kind of continue to be our mode going forward. The retail side is generally pick up at the location. Food access side is generally delivery to a location. So
nice. And if you don't mind me asking, for the retail home deliveries, if you have, what's your charge for the home delivery, or do you have like a free home delivery after a certain amount of spend?
I'm trying to think, because this is like kind of not quite my end of the business, but it's quite cheap. It was like $5 to $10.
Oh, okay.
$5. It's like pretty nominal. Yeah,
gotcha.
Pretty nominal. And I think it really is more of like, because not a lot of people utilize it, it's really just kind of this more of a convenience service that, our executive director was just like, oh yeah, I can just do a few home deliveries at the end. So yeah, we don't really like push it forward as like something that we want people to do. It's just kind of more of like, if you really can't come pick up, it's kind of a backup. That's kind of how more we treat it. But I mean, I think there would be potential if we wanted to push it more, because that's kind of what I was doing with my farm, is like, I went from all pickup to a lot of delivery, and people really liked it. It was like the convenience of it. And I think it was like, something that I did that other CSAs didn't do. And so I got maybe more customers than I would have. So that's something with the food hub. I mean, we could potentially think about offering that more as like a service that we might like gain customers that way, versus just something that we provide to our existing customer base as a convenience service. So, but like right now, that's kind of how we're approaching it.
Yeah. And if you can get people in the door, the opportunity to cross-sell a product to them once they get there is so much higher. Like, yeah, it's nice to do delivery and people love the convenience of it, but sometimes that overall spend can be a little lower because, if people come in and pick up their bag, they might, grab a milk and a thing of beef on the way out.
Yep. And we need to do more of that. We do a little bit of that, but that's something like there's a retail co-op in Des Moines that is, kind of similar to our model, where they're very retail focused, online farmers market. They do a really good job of, when you go in to pick up, they're like, I'm Jordan, I'm here. And then, okay, I'm going to go pick up your order. And then they've got like a whole grocery section for you to wait in to add. So then by the time they bring your order out, I'm like, oh, I'm also going to add this and this and this. And I think we can move in that direction of having a little bit more of a retail, where like in the waiting area, we have a bunch of products around and then people might grab them. But, and so there's some things we need to do. One is kind of handle like how much of stuff are we going to buy ahead of time? How much inventory do we want to hold on hand? Obviously, with like shelf stable stuff, it's not that big of a deal, but with more perishable stuff, we'd have to think about that. I think as we build this walk-in cooler, we'll be able to kind of transfer what was kind of our back-end infrastructure stuff maybe to the front. So we can like move the reach in to the front, so we can have a reach-in cooler in the front area versus like, oh, we need that in the back just to store stuff. So I think that might be a good time to make that transition. And then just also kind of building that into the routine of the growers where it's like, yeah, here's your pre-order, but if you want to bring extras, you can bring extras. Because that was kind of how this other co-op worked, where it was like, yeah, here's your pre-order, but like then just tell us if you're going to bring extras so that we know ahead of time. They kind of left it up to the growers. And I think maybe occasionally they would go, we would like to buy, 10 extra bags of spinach, if you have it, and then we're going to put that in the retail case. So yeah, we definitely could be doing more of that because I think we could be capturing more sales. Because I think people do spend more when they buy online. I mean, I definitely noticed that versus farmers market. Like my average sale online is so much higher. I think there's like less friction barrier. You're not physically picking things up. So I think people buy a lot online, but then I think also when people are in person, they go, oh, that looks good. And then they'll add it on. So yeah.
Yeah, if you take advantage of like the benefits of the high shopping carts online mixed with impulse spend,
you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, I guess. Would be
yeah. That's what I think. It's a good world. Because then you don't have to run a full time in person store, but if you can get them hooked the online product, then get them in the door and upsell them ahead of us on the way out. And I think that's really maximize your sales.
Do you have is that how you run? Do you do all home delivery? Do you have a pickup area, or how are you running your?
Yeah, so we have 10 locations that we offer free pickup from. And they're all maybe about 3 to 4 miles from each other. So you looked at a map, it looks like a shotgun shell of pickup locations. And those are we full online, and then you pick up for free at one of those locations out of a cooler. And that works great, especially for reaching that customer who has not a lot of time, who's a pure convenience-based customer. But the one thing we are missing out on is that in-person cross-sell, which I definitely see as like money on the table that we could be moving more product. Because what I found is that customers, they go online when our newsletter comes out, they shop what they want from the farms, and then by the time they pick up, they have no idea what they ordered. They you know what I mean? They don't even care anymore.
Oh, I got this.
Yeah, exactly. So because of that, I am opening up a farm stand this year. And then we're just going to run it like 2 days a week on pickup days and 1 day extra maybe. But kind of to try and capture some of those sales as people come in.
Okay, like at your packing location?
Yeah.
Will it be inside will it be inside the packing location or outside or?
So I just bought an enclosed trailer, like a 30-foot trailer.
Oh yeah, I did see that. Yeah,
it's like a third of it is a walk-in cooler, a third is like a kitchen with like sinks, and then like a third is like a retail space. So my plan is to then offer basic farm market products, our basic produce, a few frozen meats, honey, eggs, maybe a little bit of milk, to sell people as they come to pick up their CSA shares.
So it'll be like parked outside, like as they're walking in, kind of, oh, cool.
Yeah. So really trying to, because like, I really have seen that switch during COVID. We were already an online product, so we flourished. People loved it. And then after COVID, we flourished not because of people had to use us, because of the convenience factor of it. But now I found that a lot of our customers are pure convenience customers. We have a lot of pure convenience customers who just shop online and pick up. That I think that we're missing a larger window of people who would spend more with us or who would shop with us if we had an in-person option at least once a week.
Yeah.
And I really found like, for me personally, that the power of the online is just best teamed up when you can have just a small part, one small in-person aspect of the business to try to tie people to that person. Because for mine, I have CSA members who I've never even met. Or customers who I drop a bag cooler off of produce and then I'll never meet them ever unless they come to like the one event we do a year. So I think having just that ability to cross sell and it's funny, when we first started our farm, we did farmers markets and then we did pickup locations. I had a pickup location at the farmers market and then one at our food co-op across the street. So I could see the food co-op from the market, and people, instead of coming to the farm market and picking up the order, would go to the co-op. Just because, I understand, like they can pull up, don't talk to anybody, grab their order and just pull out really fast. And they like that. Yeah. So we really cut in on a customer base of people who just like want their food and leave, but it's like we're also not marketing to people who want to just show up. And one thing I noticed that a lot of those people would come to the market like the very first week of the CSA or one week in the spring just to say hi. Oh yes, I've now met my farmer. I know who they are, and then never see them ever again. So I think having a space where you can come at least once a week, people can just see your face and try some human connection to local food, because I think people really do want that some amount. So if you can really give them a few hours once a week to have some FaceTime, I think it really benefits. It really works well with the online model.
Yeah, no, that makes. I like how you're saying that of like you have the online sales, but then you also like try to layer in like in person sales as well, and like combining those two is actually better than one on its own. Either one on its own. Yeah, and I think it's like thinking about like we've talked about grocery stores. Like that's the typical food buying experience. You go into the grocery store, you go into the space. It's like it's the business's space that they've curated. And then if you're only ever doing like a pickup or something, it's like they're just kind of picking up the food. It's someone else. It's a different space. It's not even like a space that you curated. So like, yeah, their connection to you is kind of tenuous, and that may work, but it's like, yeah, if you can just like solidify that connection a little bit more, it makes a lot of sense.
And I mentioned it earlier, but especially in e-grocery, especially any type of online product, you're buying based on a photo, and the value proposition is that what I'm buying in that photo is what's going to show up.
Yeah, and there's like a trust there too. And some people like don't like that. They're like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to see it. Yeah.
And I think they can, especially if they could come a day or two and just see what's going on. If someone walks in and sees a haul full of beautiful produce, everything looks solid, they buy things, they look good, and the next time they're like, you know what, I want that produce, but I can't make it out to the stand. I'll use the online option to get that product because I know what it is. And I think it can be a really good way to get people in the door, really in the door in person, and then transition them, because we're all busy and we can't pay to have someone run a farm stand 7 days a week. 9 to 8 every day to compete. There's not enough margin in local produce. You need so much volume to even cover the.
You gotta be selling alcohol too, like a grocery store. That's the only way it works.
Yeah. Selling some lotto or something. You can get people to the door. So if you can just get them there one day, and then going forward, they'll say, okay, this product is nice. I know it's high quality. Then I will use this online convenient product in the future to get more products from them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and like we've talked about. During distribution, having more of a retail space, we keep talking about, should we have open hours? Should we, like we're doing, and our plan for next year is like, we're going to do some open markets, like special kind of event on a Friday afternoon, evening, doing a special event. We may end up doing some open hours, but yeah, it's really tough because the staffing, if it's like low traffic, it's just going to lose money. Having to like curate the space and have that like, a full shelf and stuff, but you're only open one day a week. So yeah, we may end up never quite moving in that direction. That was something in the other food hub that I worked for. Their warehouse was kind of open certain days. So like people were coming in to pick up pre-orders, but then the warehouse was just open. And so you'd get some walk-in orders, but it was like not very many. And also the warehouse is like on the edge of town. It was like not convenient. It wasn't a good retail location. So it didn't, I don't think it made a lot of sense. And I think they actually, right after I left, they'd hired a new executive director. They got rid of that because it was like, we're just going to do offsite pickups. We're not going to do, pick up in the warehouse anymore. It just kind of didn't make sense. But then I kind of came to Grinnell Farm Table. I'm like, well, maybe we should start doing that. As they were like, stopping doing it. But it's a different situation. We have a much better retail location, like for walk-in traffic and stuff. So I think it makes more sense for us if we were to move in that direction.
And especially, you just said that you have majority of people are coming to pick up already, which is fantastic. Yeah. If you've already trained people to show up at this location weekly for the spots, and if you can just take advantage of that a little more, and if they're already showing up, like you've done the job. That's the hard part. Is getting people to getting people You've done it. Well, Jordan, I want to end the podcast on a final question. Basically, kind of, how do you find balance in your work, and how do you how do you balance farming and your private work and family? But I also feel like since we've last spoken, you've made a lot of changes in your business to actually balance your life out and make it a little more not flexible, but like sustainable. With the midst of different work now you're doing. So how do you really find balance in feeding your community?
Yeah, I think, when I decided to scale down the farm, I was really kind of like doing some soul searching or of like, what do I really want to do? Like if I'm not feeling like I have to be doing this, I have to be running full time, I have to be doing a CSA, if I'm really going to make a choice about like what feels good, what makes sense for me. And I kind of did that evaluation and I realized like I wanted to stay connected to farming. I liked being connected to the land. I liked growing things. I liked having the tangible product. There were a lot of I didn't like managing people. That was extremely stressful to me. Running the whole business of like having to be responsible for managing people, planning the farm, running the business, doing the dish, like that was not working for me. So I realized I still wanted to farm, but I didn't want it to be like this all consuming pursuit. I didn't want to be my only source of income. So I think that's where I found balance is like staying connected to the farm, I'm still farming. And that's what I would say to people, or even like sometimes would post on Instagram and just be like, yep, still farming, like in case like, even though I'm not running the CSA, like, look, here's the farm. Look, I'm growing stuff. I'm still farming. So I still feel like I have that connection and I'm still able to like utilize my skills. I feel like I have so much, like hard won experience from 10 years and like just kind of starting at 24 and like not knowing anything and having to like teach myself and learn from like, I just feel like I really like, that was like, people plow all this time into careers, becoming a lawyer or a doctor or something. It's like, I plowed it all into becoming a farmer. Like that's where my skills are. So I don't want to lose that. I don't want to stop doing that. So I feel like still having that connection to farming, but not having it be that all consuming pursuit. I feel like one thing that's really helped is like cutting down the number of crops and really trying to like, I really track my time now in a way that I didn't when I was full-time farming. And that's partly because I'm doing work that's like billable, so I need to do that, but also I'm really tracking my farm time. And I really want to do some enterprise budgets for my crops so that I can really make rigorous decisions about how I'm spending my time and just really try to cut out extraneous time because it's like, I really want to be, when I was full-time farming, it was like, I would fill up the hours. You could always fill up the hours. And now I'm much more like, I'm not at the farm all day. I'm only going to go to the farm if I need to do something. I'm not just going to like show up. I'm not just going to be there 7 to 5 Monday through Friday because I've got staff and, so I'm really that's kind of, I guess how I'm finding balance is like, I'm really like planning when I spend my time and when I work and when I do things more so than just kind of like, I've got a schedule that I'm filling up with things because there's always something to do. And so that's helping a lot. I mean, it's allowing me to prioritize like home life a little bit more. Like if I want to take an out, like leave early and just go cook, or if I'm just going to like work later into the morning and like do the laundry and the dishes before I leave the house, and then I don't leave the house until 10 or something. That's all like available to me now, and that just helps a lot. Just like being able to choose to take an hour here, take an hour there, to run errands, to do things, to not have to be on the farm all the time. But I've got staff. If I'm going to like leave the farm, I got to make sure they've got things to do. So I'm really, like I said, I'm really liking the balance that I've found between the paid work and the farm work, and feeling like it's not overwhelming, that I'm able to make enough money to get by. And there may come a time where like things change and I really need to like make more money. I might need to go find a full-time job or something. And I'm like, I think I'm just like more, I'm more flexible now than I was before, just in terms of like, I'm able, like that pivot doesn't feel like the end of the world to me. Because it was like the idea of ending farming felt like the end of the world, I got over it pretty quickly, but my identity is so much less tied into like, I've got to be this type of farmer or I'm not legit. That was kind of how I thought. And I kind of, and going through this transition, I've kind of like gotten over that. And it's just made me a lot more free in how I think about my life, where it's like, I could be doing this in 5 years. I could be doing this. I don't know. And it's okay. Whereas before it was like, I'm going to farm for the rest of my, it's like kind of very kind of, I like kind of operating with blinders on. So I just feel a lot more flexible, like mentally now, about how I make decisions.
Man, Jordan, that hit hard actually, because I don't know, but I get in that rut all the time. I'm not growing salad mix. I'm not a farmer. When we all know that like being a farmer is just supporting the local food system, that could be repairing tractor tires and you got an acorn squash. You're a farmer just as much as someone who's got 100 acres of salad and tunnel. We're all farmers. It's not just like delivering food people at the farmer's market that makes you a grower.
Right. And just all those other parts of the food system are so important. That's the other thing too, is like there is kind of an overemphasis on farmers and like an underemphasis on all the other parts of the food system that make it work. And so, like the food hub work, I feel like I now have I'm bringing my farm experience to the food hub work, But I also now have like, I ran that food hub. I've worked in this food hub. I'm like connected. Like when people go, oh, I need this, I know where to find it because I'm in this network of growers. I've been in this network of growers for 10 plus years. So I feel like I really like that aspect of food hub work, is the procurement end, where like someone is like, hey, I'm trying to source stuff for a dinner or an event. And then they give me a list of stuff and I go out and find it. I really like doing that. And I feel like I have all these connections to do that. So yeah, I feel like I have this skill set with, that I built through farming, but like goes beyond farming, like into food systems, like we said, was just so important. Like that's like the connective part of the food system. And like, that's super important. So yeah, I feel like I get to utilize like a whole range of skills, including like from directly growing the food to like knowing how to distribute it. So yeah, it feels very complementary work to me. And I know, like I mentioned, or you had that conversation with Jesse, where I think you both mentioned kind of doing that as like, you have part-time farming and then the part-time something else. And the part-time something else is like, can just be another part of the food system, which is like just as important, right? Yeah.
You can have so much more effect on the little food system than just growing food. I in the same boat as you are. Like, does blinders get in there? And I feel like also I got into farming so young, and I feel like my understanding of what farming was very black and white. And I realized, I can get more food and feed more people if I'm not farming all the time. Which sounds like asinine to think about. It feels also as a betrayal of my love of agriculture and my love of growing zucchini. But I'm like, if I just grow a little bit less and I work with other growers, I can feed my community sometimes. And that still feels good.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely how I feel. And yeah, it's like I'm able to, yes, like I can still grow and contribute to that, but it's and that's like the collectivity of like getting away from the individual farm mindset. And getting more into like the collective mindset of like farms working together, being more collaborative, sourcing from different farms. And like, I think from the consumer standpoint too, them not being so rigid about like, I want everything to come from one farm, it's like, no, I'm going to get it from a few different places. Yeah. So,
well, Jordan, I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me today. It's been eye-opening, enlightening, and it's also been great to catch up with you and hear how you've grown over the last few years. If folks want to learn more about you or the food hub you're working with, how can they learn more about that?
Yeah. Well, my farm is Middleway Farms, middlewayfarm.com. And then that's connected to my social media too. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And then the food hub is called Grinnell Farm to Table. It's grinnellfarmtotable.org. And then that's kind of our main nonprofit site, but then also it's got a link to like go to our food hub store, which is kind of on a separate site, the local food marketplace site. And yeah, thanks, Alex. I really appreciate the invite to come back. Yeah, love chatting with you, whether it's recorded or not. So
yeah, anytime, man. I appreciate it. Have a great day, and don't work too hard now.
Thanks.
Okay, man. Talk to you later.
A huge thanks again to Jordan for taking time out of his busy schedule to share his bold vision for Grinnell Farm to Table with all of us. The one thing that keeps coming up when I talk to Jordan is his ability to be flexible and maneuver his business towards market trends and profitable enterprises. Farming is a game of action and reaction. You can't be afraid to pivot to do what's best for your business, self, or community. To stay connected, you can follow both Middleway Farm and Grinnell Farm to Table on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, don't work too hard and have a great day.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that episode. Always make sure to check the links in the show notes for how to follow our guests and hosts. The No-Till Market Garden podcast is a free show that is supported by folks like you who contribute every month over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. That support helps ensure all the shows we do, from the Seed Farmer podcast to the Winter Growers podcast, the Collaborative Farming podcast, the Composter podcast, Growers Daily, and of course, the No-Till Market Garden podcast can continue to go and grow. You can also find books and hats as well as an active forum over at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge thank you to editor Michael Sellis and producer Jackson Roulette for all their work on this show and the rest of the team over at no-tillgrowers.com. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and make sure you are subscribed wherever you're hearing this so you don't miss the next episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. See you then.
If your kid thinks, I'm not a math kid, think again. With Mathnasium, every kid can be a math kid. At our learning centers, we customize math instruction for each student, so advanced kids get challenged and struggling kids get better. Visit mathnasium.com to find a location near you.